My name is Mia Carter. I'm 29 years old, and until yesterday, my life felt ordinary. Working as a digital marketing specialist for a fashion startup in Los Angeles, juggling deadlines, surviving on iced coffee, and scrolling through TikTok at midnight. Nothing in my carefully balanced routine could have prepared me for what was about to crash into my world. Yesterday, I inherited $3 million in cash, a sleek glass-walled mansion perched in the Hollywood Hills, and control over Aunt Clara's fashion empire, an empire valued at $15 million. It should have felt like the universe finally gave me a win after years of scraping by. But instead, standing in that downtown Los Angeles law office, staring at the city skyline glittering behind the glass walls, my hands were shaking because the one thing I never expected walked right back into my life. My parents. The air smelled faintly of leather and polish, the kind of sterile richness you only find in corporate towers. I shifted on the plush leather seat, nerves buzzing as the lawyer flipped through thick papers. My chest felt heavy, grief still raw from Aunt Clara's funeral just days earlier. I kept seeing her silver bob and sharp Ray-Ban sunglasses, her steady hand squeezing mine in the hospital room. She was gone, but her empire now rested on me. I was trying to process the weight of it all when the glass door opened and my entire body froze. They walked in like ghosts I thought I'd buried. My mother first, in a faded floral dress that couldn't hide the way her eyes darted around the room like she was casing the place. Behind her, my father, taller, shoulders slightly hunched, but his grin, fake, slimy, was unchanged. 14 years vanished in an instant, and I was 15 again, standing in that cold Chicago apartment the morning they abandoned me. My pulse hammered in my ears. My throat went dry. What were they doing here? "Sweetheart," my mother cooed, voice syrupy and strange on her tongue, like she hadn't spoken to me in years, which she hadn't. She reached her hand toward mine, fingers trembling with rehearsed tenderness. "We're still your legal guardians, honey." Guardians. The word sliced through me. Guardians don't leave you with a note on the kitchen table, phones disconnected, fridge empty, and debts piled high. Guardians don't vanish into the night and leave you to wonder if you weren't worth fighting for. My breath caught as I looked at her hand, hovering, waiting. I didn't move. My pulse pounded. How dare they waltz back in now? My father chuckled, nervous but trying to play it cool the way he always did. "Mia, look at you, all grown up, successful. Clara raised you well." He glanced around the office, his smile flickering as his gaze landed on the stack of documents. "And we're here to make sure everything's handled properly, legally. As your parents, it's our duty." My stomach twisted. Duty. Now suddenly they remembered the word? 14 years of silence, and the moment millions were on the table, they rediscovered their parental duty? I bit the inside of my cheek, trying to keep my expression neutral, but my body betrayed me. My hands curled into fists in my lap. The lawyer hadn't arrived yet, and in that tense silence, their act grew bolder. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, crocodile tears smudging her mascara. My father leaned back, too comfortable, like he owned the place. Their voices overlapped in an awkward chorus of guilt and excuses. We were sick. Times were hard. We thought Clara could give you what we couldn't. Each word scraped like nails across my nerves. Did they think I'd forgotten the years of shouting, the gambling slips, the empty fridge? I stared at the city skyline outside, towers glittering in the late afternoon sun, trying to steady my breath. But then, the door opened again, and my lawyer stepped inside. He was calm, tall, his dark suit crisp, a stack of files tucked under one arm. The shift in my parents was instant. The color drained from their faces, the false warmth vanishing like smoke. Their smiles froze, brittle. Something about his presence unsettled them. My skin prickled. What had he uncovered that made them suddenly look like cornered animals? Before I could ask, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new voicemail. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway, heart still thudding from the confrontation. The hallway was quiet, carpet muffling my footsteps, the air cooler here. With trembling hands, I pressed play. A man's voice filled my ear, rough, low, urgent. "Mia, this is Victor. You don't know me, but I knew your parents a long time ago. Don't sign anything until we talk. Please. You need to hear the truth." My knees weakened. My back pressed against the cold glass wall as I replayed the words in my head. Don't sign anything. Who was Victor? What truth was he talking about? My parents' faces, their crocodile tears, their sudden return after 14 years. They all collided with that single warning. Suspicion tightened around me like a noose. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Inside the conference room, I could see them through the glass. My mother wringing her hands, my father leaning forward, lips tight, eyes darting toward the lawyer. They looked nervous now, not like grieving parents, but like predators caught in the open. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just about money. This was something darker. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. I wanted to scream at them, demand answers, claw back the years they'd stolen from me. But I stayed quiet, my voice trapped in my chest, my mind racing with one question after another. Why now? What debts? What secrets were still lurking in their shadows? And why was some stranger calling me with cryptic warnings? The lawyer's voice carried faintly through the glass, steady and professional, while my parents fumbled for composure. I pressed my palm against the cold surface, staring at them, feeling a wave of betrayal and fury burn through me. They thought they could just walk back into my life, claim guardianship, and control everything Clara had trusted me with. They thought they could manipulate me again, the way they always did. But something inside me shifted in that moment. I wasn't 15 anymore. I wasn't the scared girl left behind with a note and an empty fridge. I was 29, sitting on millions, holding the keys to a fashion empire, and maybe, just maybe, I was finally in a position to uncover the truth they had buried. My phone screen dimmed, the voicemail ended, and silence pressed in around me. I closed my eyes, took a long, shaky breath, and whispered to myself, "They don't get to decide who I am anymore." Still, my hands trembled. Betrayal had claws, and it wasn't letting go just yet. And as much as I wanted to run, one thing was clear. This story was only beginning. The moment my parents walked back into that law office, dripping with crocodile tears, a part of me slipped backward in time. My chest tightened, and before I could stop it, memories came rushing in. Memories of a childhood that began warm and familiar, but cracked open in ways I never wanted to face again. I grew up in a cramped apartment on the edge of a Chicago suburb. The walls were thin enough that I could hear our neighbors arguing through the vents, and in winter, the windows frosted over so badly that my breath lingered in the air like smoke. Still, when I think back, some of my earliest memories are painted with a strange kind of sweetness. I remember curling up on our sagging couch with my parents, the three of us bundled in mismatched blankets, the glow of the TV flickering across our faces as we binged Stranger Things together. I didn't understand half of the plot, but I felt safe then, pressing close to my mom's side while my dad laughed too loud at his own jokes. Sometimes, on weekends, we'd pack peanut butter sandwiches and drive out to the park. My dad would toss me a Frisbee while Mom sat on a bench, her smile soft and tired, and I'd chase after it until my legs burned, feeling like the world was small enough to hold together, and Christmas. God, Christmas was magic in its own way. We didn't have much, but every year Dad would splurge on a big pink box of Krispy Kreme donuts, still warm, their sugary glaze sticking to our fingers. We'd sit cross-legged on the floor around our fake tree, its plastic needles shedding like snow, and sip cheap hot chocolate from chipped mugs. For a moment, I believed we were a family that could survive anything, Even now, the faint smell of sugar and cocoa can yank me back there, a girl who thought love was enough. But love alone couldn't pay the bills. As I grew older, the cracks began to show. I started noticing the tension in the air, sharp as glass. My parents' voices rose more often, fights about money echoing through the tiny apartment. I'd hear the muffled slam of the bathroom door, followed by the heavy silence of Mom's sobs. Dad would leave late at night and come back smelling like beer and smoke, dropping crumpled bedding slips into the trash. He called it just a little fun, but his fun left us with overdue bills stacked high on the kitchen counter. I remember running my fingers over the red notices, my stomach nodding, not fully understanding what it meant, but knowing it wasn't good. The fridge became emptier with each passing month. I used to open it, staring at shelves that held little more than a carton of milk on the edge of spoiling, and maybe a half-empty ketchup bottle. Sometimes dinner was stale cereal, sometimes nothing at all. Mom grew quieter, her depression wrapping around her like a heavy blanket she couldn't shrug off. Some mornings, she didn't get out of bed at all. I'd tiptoe around her, careful not to make noise, terrified of pushing her deeper into that hollow space she seemed to live in. So I made myself perfect. Or at least I tried. Straight A's, honor roll certificates taped to the wall, a bedroom spotless enough that it looked staged. I believed if I did everything right, if I became the daughter they could be proud of, maybe they'd stop fighting. Maybe Dad would quit betting. Maybe Mom would find her laughter again. Every gold star, every neatly folded blanket, every smile I forced onto my face, it was all a silent bargain I made with myself. Keep the family together. Be perfect enough, and they'll stay. But perfection wasn't enough. Deep down, I think I knew it. There's one memory that still haunts me, blurry but sharp in the wrong places. I was maybe 12, sitting in my room with the door cracked open. Their voices drifted down the hall, low but heated. Mom's voice, strained and breaking, carried through the air. "We can't keep going like this, Tom." Her words were faint, but they sliced me open. My father muttered something about debts, something about owing people you didn't want to owe. I held my breath, frozen, hoping they wouldn't realize I was listening. I didn't understand the details, but the word debts burned into my brain. Debts to who? For what? And how dangerous were they? Even now, that single word still echoes inside me, a shadow I can't shake. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter, that if I worked harder, smiled brighter, cleaned faster, maybe the debts would disappear. Maybe the fights would stop. But looking back now, I can see the truth I couldn't face as a child. No matter how perfect I tried to be, I could never erase the choices they made. They were already slipping away from me long before that freezing November morning when they left for good. I thought being perfect would make them stay. How wrong was I? The smell of Krispy Kreme and cocoa is tangled forever with the sound of their fights, the empty fridge, and that word that cracked my childhood open, debts. What kind of debts were worth abandoning a daughter for? What kind of parents choose escape over love? Those are the questions that still haunt me, even now, as an adult, staring across a polished conference table at the same people who taught me how betrayal feels. I was 15 when the world cracked open beneath me. It was a November morning in Chicago, the kind that seeps into your bones before you even step outside. The window in my bedroom was frosted over, thin ice tracing patterns across the glass. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, waiting for the usual sounds. The clatter of my dad rifling through the kitchen drawers, my mom's soft humming while she made coffee. But the apartment was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that makes your stomach twist before your brain can catch up. I padded down the narrow hallway, my breath puffing in little clouds. The carpet was worn thin, and the air smelled faintly of last night's cigarette smoke. The kitchen light was off. The chairs were pushed back, uneven, as though someone had left in a hurry. I frowned, reaching for the fridge door, hoping for milk to drown my stale cereal. Instead, my eyes landed on the table. A single sheet of paper lay there, its edges curling, the handwriting jagged and hurried. My heart thudded as I picked it up. "Mia, we can't go on. Aunt Clara will care for you. Sorry." That was it. No explanation, no phone number, no promise to come back. Just a few words scrawled in ink, sealing the fact that I was alone. I read the note again, my fingers trembling, as if maybe I'd missed something between the lines. My chest tightened, panic clawing at me. I rushed to their bedroom. The closet doors gaped open, half empty. Drawers were pulled out, socks scattered on the floor like they'd been too hurried to care. I yanked open the nightstand, nothing but dust and a broken watch. They were gone. Completely, utterly gone. My phone shook in my hand as I dialed Dad's number. Ring, ring. Then silence. I tried Mom. Straight to voicemail. Again. Again. Each unanswered call felt like a punch, straight to the gut. Where were they? How could they just vanish? I pressed the phone to my ear so hard it hurt, whispering into the empty line, "Pick up. Please, just pick up." Hours blurred together as I scoured every corner of that apartment. Their coats were missing, their old duffel bag, even the stash of poker chips Dad kept hidden in the hall closet. My legs grew weak, my head dizzy. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the note so tight it crumpled in my fist. "We can't go on." What did that even mean? Couldn't go on with me? With the debts I overheard them whisper about? Or with each other? The fridge hummed when I opened it again. A half-empty jug of sour milk, a bruised apple, and a box of cereal with just dust at the bottom. That's what I had left. I chewed stale flakes that scraped against my tongue, each bite tasting like betrayal. My mind raced. If I told anyone, foster care could come knocking. What if they sent me to strangers? What if I never found my parents again? So I stayed quiet. I told myself they'd come back. Any day now, they'd walk through that door and laugh about how it was all a mistake. But days stretched into weeks. The landlord's knocks grew louder, sharper, angrier. His voice through the door was like a growl. "Rent's due, Mia. I don't care how old you are." I pressed myself against the wall, heart racing, praying he wouldn't break down the door. The thought of being dragged into some system, packed off to a family who didn't want me, made me sick. Still, fear of losing the only home I knew gnawed at me worse than hunger. Finally, with trembling fingers, I called my school counselor. My voice cracked as I told her my parents were gone. She said she'd help. She said I wasn't alone. But I didn't believe her, not really, because the only people I wanted weren't coming back. One night, desperate for answers, I searched again. I pulled open drawers, dumped out boxes, even crawled under the bed. That's when I found it. Wedged behind a stack of old magazines in my parents' dresser, an envelope sealed but brittle. My heart pounded as I tore it open. Inside was a letter. Not for me, not exactly. It wasn't even signed. Just a few sentences written in the same rushed hand as the note on the kitchen table. Words that made my blood run cold. "The debts are too dangerous. They'll come for us if we don't disappear. Clara can give Mia what we can't." Dangerous debts. My chest tightened as I read the words over and over. It wasn't just money troubles. It wasn't just Dad's gambling or overdue bills. This was something else, something darker. My parents hadn't just abandoned me. They'd fled. From who? From what? And why leave me behind like some pawn they didn't care enough to protect? I lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, the letter clutched in my hand. Every creak in the building, every car backfiring outside made me flinch. I imagined faceless men pounding on our door, demanding what my parents owed. I imagined them realizing only I was left. Fear wrapped around me tighter than the blanket I clutched. I whispered into the dark, "Where are you? Why didn't you take me?" No answer came, only the groan of pipes, the hiss of the radiator, and the emptiness of an apartment that had once held a family. They thought Aunt Clara would step in. They thought she could erase what they did. But all I could feel in that moment was the weight of their absence, the sharp edge of betrayal, and the shadow of debts I couldn't yet understand. The note said, "Sorry, but sorry was just ink on paper." It couldn't warm the cold November air. It couldn't fill the silence. It couldn't bring them back. And as I curled into myself on that sagging couch, one truth hit harder than all the rest. I was abandoned, and I was completely, terrifyingly alone. The weeks after my parents vanished were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I barely slept lying awake on that sagging couch, clutching the letter about their dangerous debts, like it might explain something if I stared long enough. But it didn't. All it did was remind me of the emptiness pressing in from every corner of our run-down Chicago apartment. When the landlord's voice boomed through the door again, louder, angrier than before, I knew I couldn't hide much longer. That's when social services stepped in. Miss Jenkins arrived one gray morning, her heavy wool coat dusted with snowflakes that melted onto the floor as she stepped inside. She had kind eyes, but the way she looked around at the peeling wallpaper and the empty fridge made me flush with shame. She spoke gently, asking questions I didn't want to answer. Where were my parents? When had I last seen them? Did I have any relatives nearby? I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered the only name I could think of. Clara, my dad's sister. The woman who lived a world away in Los Angeles, who I'd only met twice at awkward family gatherings when I was little. She was more myth than memory, whispered about like some untouchable figure who had left Chicago behind for a life of money and glamour. Miss Jenkins made a few calls, her voice calm but clipped. I remember her saying, "She's agreed. She's coming." I didn't believe it at first, not until the day Clara arrived. The sound of tires crunching on icy pavement pulled me to the window. Outside, gleaming like something from another planet, was a Tesla. Black, spotless, reflecting the weak winter light. My heart stuttered. The door swung open, and there she was. Clara Carter. A silver bob framed her face, sharp and precise, and Ray-Ban shades hid her eyes. She moved with a kind of determination that filled the air before she even spoke. She didn't hug me. She didn't waste time with questions. She just looked around the apartment, her jaw tight, then turned to me. "Pack what matters. We're leaving now." Her voice wasn't harsh, but it didn't leave room for argument. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. I grabbed my school backpack, stuffed in a few clothes, my journal and the photo of me at age 7 with Mom and Dad, grinning in front of that fake Christmas tree. The rest I left behind. Sliding into the Tesla felt like stepping into another universe. The leather seat smelled rich and new, the dashboard glowing with quiet confidence. I pressed my fingers into the armrest, half afraid I'd break something. Outside, Chicago blurred by. Slush-streaked sidewalks, flickering neon signs, the cold gray skyline I'd grown up under. Clara didn't speak, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, hands steady on the wheel. I sat in silence, my mind racing with questions I couldn't form out loud. The mansion hit me like a punch to the gut. Perched in the Hollywood Hills, it looked like a glass fortress rising out of the earth. Floor-to-ceiling windows caught the sunlight, reflecting a pool that shimmered blue even in the evening. Orange trees lined the yard, their fruit glowing like ornaments. The air smelled different here, cleaner, warmer, touched with jasmine. I should have felt safe. But standing there with my backpack digging into my shoulder, I only felt small, like I had stumbled into a museum where I didn't belong. Inside was worse. Everything gleamed, marble counters, polished wood floors, spotless glass walls, not a thing out of place. No clutter, no peeling paint, no sagging couch. It should have been a relief, but instead it felt alien. My footsteps echoed too loud. The silence wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of abandonment. It was sharp, cold, like the house itself was holding its breath. Clara led me through the rooms with brisk efficiency. "This is yours," she said, pushing open the door to a bedroom bigger than our entire apartment back in Chicago. A king-sized bed, crisp white sheets, a view of the city glowing below. My throat tightened. I set my backpack on the floor like it might stain the carpet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sheets smelled of lavender, soft against my skin, but it was all too much. I kept thinking of the note on the kitchen table, the word debts, the landlord's pounding fists. I rolled over, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd traded one kind of prison for another. This mansion's a fortress, but am I really safe? A few days later, while Clara was on a call in her study, I wandered through the house, drawn to the sleek office space where a stack of papers lay half buried under glossy magazines. Curiosity pulled me closer. My hands shook as I lifted the top sheet, a bank statement. My eyes darted down the page, confusion curdling into rage. My parents' names, account balance, 0. Transaction history, withdrawal after withdrawal until nothing remained. And worse, credit card debt stacked on top, interest piling high. They hadn't just left me, they drained everything we had, leaving me in ruins before disappearing into the night. My stomach dropped. Heat rushed to my face, my hands trembling so violently the paper nearly slipped from my fingers. How could they? How could they rob their own kid, strip me bare, then vanish without a word beyond sorry? I pressed the paper against my chest, my heartbeat slamming like a drum. Anger tangled with grief, relief twisted with betrayal. Clara had rescued me, yes, but rescue didn't erase the truth. My parents weren't victims of circumstance. They weren't forced into this. They had chosen to abandon me, chosen to take everything and leave me behind. In that moment, the mansion felt even colder. Its glass walls loomed high, reflecting back a version of me I didn't recognize. A girl caught between despair and survival, standing in luxury she didn't earn, haunted by debts she didn't create. And all I could think, over and over, was this. If my own parents could betray me like that, what else had they done? Living in Clara's mansion was like being dropped into a world that looked perfect on the surface, but felt alien in every detail. The house stood high above Los Angeles, its glass walls reflecting the city lights, its hallways echoing with the sound of my own footsteps. Every room smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus, like it had been scrubbed clean of chaos. And maybe that was the problem, because I carried chaos with me, tucked into every memory of the life I'd left behind. Clara had rules, and she didn't just suggest them, she enforced them. Breakfast was at 7 a.m. sharp, not 7:05, not I'll grab something later. At 7, she sat at the long marble dining table, silverware aligned perfectly, coffee steaming in a porcelain cup. I remember that first morning, stumbling downstairs with my hair unbrushed and my phone clutched in my hand. She glanced at the clock, then at me, and said evenly, "Rules are here for a reason, Mia. Breakfast ends at 7:30. I bristled at her tone, even though it wasn't cruel. It was matter of fact, like gravity or traffic lights. I sat down, sulking, as she passed me a plate of scrambled eggs and avocado toast. I picked at it, thinking about the stale cereal I'd grown used to in Chicago. Back then, food had been survival. Here, it was ritual, and I didn't know which one felt stranger. The rules didn't stop at breakfast. Clara signed me up for online piano lessons 3 days a week. The glossy black piano sat in the corner of the living room, polish so bright it reflected my scowling face as I stumbled through scales. She limited my phone use at night. No endless scrolling through TikTok until 2 a.m., like I used to when loneliness kept me awake. And dinner wasn't just dinner. It was a discussion table where she asked me about fashion trends, about why a brand's campaign worked or didn't, about what I noticed in the details. I felt like a student in some secret class where the lessons were hidden inside everyday moments, but all I could feel at first was trapped. The house, for all its luxury, felt like a cold glass cage. I tested the boundaries because I needed to know if she was like them, if breaking a rule meant losing love or being abandoned again. One night, I stayed up past midnight, watching videos with the volume low under my blanket. The next morning, Clara noticed the dark circles under my eyes. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just said, "You're exhausted and it shows. Choices have consequences, Mia. That's how the world works." I wanted her to explode, to prove that underneath her calm exterior was the same fury my father used to unleash when things didn't go his way. But she didn't, and her lack of anger unsettled me more than rage ever could. The weeks stretched on, my rebellion taking smaller forms, leaving my room messy, rolling my eyes during piano lessons, ignoring her questions at dinner. Every time she responded with patience, sometimes too much patience. It was like she knew I was pushing, testing, daring her to break. But she wouldn't. She held her ground without cruelty, and slowly it began to wear me down. Still, the nights were the hardest. I'd lie in that enormous bed, sheets smelling faintly of lavender, staring at the ceiling as memories of Chicago bled through. The empty fridge, the note on the table, my parents' voices whispering about debts. I kept a small box of photos under the bed, snapshots of Christmas mornings, picnics in the park, my mom's smile before it faded into silence. One night, I pulled them out, the edges fraying under my fingertips. My chest tightened, my throat burning as tears spilled hot down my face. The sobs came in gasps, ugly and loud, the kind I hadn't let myself release in years. The door creaked open. Clara stood there, framed by the soft hallway light. For a moment, I expected her to scold me for being loud, for breaking some unspoken rule of silence. Instead, she walked in quietly and set a box of tissues on the bed. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask questions or tell me to stop. She just sat beside me, her presence steady, her gaze turned away as I wept into my hands. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The storm inside me slowly burned out, leaving me raw and hollow. I glanced at her, waiting for the judgment, the lecture, but she stayed silent, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture calm. Finally, when my breathing slowed, she reached over and handed me one last tissue. No words, just that simple gesture. And somehow, it was enough. In that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Not the conditional kind, not the kind that could vanish with a slammed door or a bad bet. It was a quiet safety, one built not on promises, but on presence. I'm a guest in her world, I thought, but her silence feels like home. That night, I put the photos back in their box, but for the first time, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I still didn't fully trust her, not yet, but a seed had been planted, one that whispered, maybe, just maybe, this was what family could look like. Courtrooms carry a kind of heavy silence that feels older than the walls themselves. The scent of polished wood, worn leather, and faint dust filled the air, mixing with the distant hum of traffic outside downtown Los Angeles. I sat at a long table under fluorescent lights that made every face look pale. The judge shuffled papers, clerks tapped keys, and each sound reminded me I didn't belong in this world of rules and procedure. But I was here because my parents weren't. They were missing, vanished ghosts, and someone had to decide what happened to me. Clara sat next to me, a pillar of steel in her black suit. Her posture never wavered, her eyes trained on the judge with an expression that could slice through stone. Beside her, the lawyers she'd hired, the kind with immaculate ties and voices smooth as velvet, flipped through their files. They spoke with precision: guardianship, legal custody, financial protections. They painted a picture of stability, a fortress to shield me from the chaos my parents had left behind. Each time they said, "In the best interest of the child," my heart clenched. Child. At 15, I felt both too old and too young to be sitting there, waiting for strangers to decide who I belonged to. When the judge struck the gavel, the sound cracked through the room. It wasn't loud, but it echoed in my chest like thunder. Every decision felt final, each ruling a reminder that my parents weren't coming back to fight for me. Not today, not ever. Clara's hand brushed mine under the table once, brief but steady. She didn't look at me, but the gesture anchored me to something solid. Watching her, I wondered if she ever got scared or if she just refused to show it. I sat there, caught between awe at her strength and the small, nagging voice whispering I didn't deserve her protection. Outside the courthouse, the sun was blinding, bouncing off the glass towers around us. The city buzzed, car horns sharp against the heavy thoughts in my head. Clara walked ahead, her heels clicking with purpose, while I lagged a few steps behind. My chest felt heavy, like I'd been asked to carry a burden I couldn't name. That's when Clara said I needed therapy. "Mia, you've been through too much alone," she told me, her voice firm but not unkind. "You don't have to carry it by yourself anymore." I wanted to argue, to insist I was fine, that I didn't need anyone prying into my thoughts. But deep down, I knew she was right. Dr. Ramirez's office felt like stepping into another world. Warm light spilled through a tall window, brushing across shelves filled with books and small potted plants. The air smelled of vanilla candles and fresh coffee, soothing and safe. I sat stiffly on a plush couch, arms crossed like armor. Above me hung a framed print of the ocean, waves curling endlessly toward some unseen shore. Dr. Ramirez had kind eyes and a calm presence that made silence less terrifying. She didn't rush me. Her questions were simple, open-ended, like invitations instead of demands. At first, my words came in fragments. The note on the kitchen table, my parents' sudden disappearance, the phrase "dangerous debts," that still echoed like a curse. She nodded, letting the pauses stretch, never filling them for me. Slowly, my defenses cracked. I admitted the things I hadn't told anyone. How I scrolled through Instagram late at night, typing in random names, searching for their faces in strangers' profiles. How I zoomed in on blurry photos, convincing myself it might be them. How the guilt gnawed at me. If I'd been a better daughter, smarter, quieter, maybe they wouldn't have left. Maybe they'd have stayed. Dr. Ramirez leaned forward, her voice low but steady. "Mia, you didn't cause their choices. You survived them." Her words hit harder than I expected. For years, I had carried the weight of their absence like a punishment. Hearing someone say out loud that I wasn't the cause, that I wasn't broken, was like opening a window in a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me. Session by session, I began to let go. I stopped scrolling through social media hunting for their shadows. I stopped imagining them walking back through the door with apologies that would never come. Slowly, I started to picture a life that belonged to me, not to their mistakes. Clara noticed the change. Our dinners grew lighter, the silence less suffocating. Sometimes we even laughed. I started to believe healing was possible, that maybe I could build something new out of the ashes they'd left behind. But healing is never a straight line. One evening, the illusion cracked. I was in Clara's study, the sleek desk glowing under a warm lamp, neat stacks of papers arranged with her usual precision. The room smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden outside. Clara's phone rang. She answered quickly, her tone clipped and professional. At first, her face was unreadable, but as the voice on the other end spoke, something shifted. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flickered with a flash of unease I'd never seen before. When she hung up, I asked, "Who was that?" For a heartbeat, she hesitated. It was small, but enough to set every nerve in my body on edge. Then she brushed it off. "An old associate of your parents'. Nothing important." Her words were sharp, final, but her hand lingered near the phone as if it might ring again. Clara never brushed things off. Not like that. The unease coiled tighter in my chest. Who had called her? Why now, after all these years? And why did she look like a door she thought she'd locked had suddenly been forced open? That night, I lay in bed, Dr. Ramirez's words echoing in my mind. I was moving on. I was surviving. But I couldn't ignore the way Clara's composure had cracked. She knew something she wasn't telling me. The thought gnawed at me, keeping sleep far away. Then, just past midnight, my phone buzzed. The glow of the screen cut through the darkness. Clara believed in structure the way other people believed in religion. So when she enrolled me in one of the most elite private schools in Los Angeles, she didn't present it as an option. She just said, "This is where you belong now," like it was already decided. The school was a world I'd only seen in movies. Shiny glass buildings, perfectly manicured lawns, and hallways filled with kids in designer sneakers and monogrammed backpacks. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and floor polish, the kind of mix that screams money. I remember my first morning there, clutching my notebook like a lifeline while groups of students laughed in clusters. Their laughter wasn't cruel, not at first, but it was sharp enough to remind me I was an outsider stepping into their polished bubble. Still, I threw myself into it. Maybe because I needed to prove to Clara and to myself that I deserved this new life. I joined the marketing club, and within weeks I was leading projects, pitching ideas with the confidence I didn't always feel inside. Words spilled out of me about brand strategy, social media engagement, and consumer psychology, things I'd picked up just by watching Clara work. When the faculty advisor clapped me on the back and said, "This girl's got it," pride swelled in my chest. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was shining. Clara encouraged it. She carved out time every week for me to sit in on Zoom calls with real designers, people whose names I'd only read in Vogue. From the sleek corner of her study, I listened to them talk about textile sourcing, brand image, and the future of sustainable fashion. Clara never treated me like a child tagging along. She asked me questions in front of them, gave me space to answer, even when my voice trembled. After one call ended, she said, "You have instincts. Don't waste them." Those words stuck with me like a thread I wanted to follow, but not everyone saw me that way. Rumors spread fast in schools like that, whispered between locker doors and amplified in group chats. It started with a girl in my economics class, her lips curling into a smirk as she muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "You're only here because your aunt's loaded." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I laughed it off in front of her, but inside my stomach twisted. Soon it wasn't just one voice. I overheard others saying I had a shortcut to success, that the teachers went easier on me, that I was a charity case paraded by Clara. Their stares followed me down the hall, eyes heavy with judgment I couldn't shake. Every compliment I got from a teacher or mentor now felt poisoned, like maybe it wasn't about my work at all. Maybe it was just Clara's name buying me credit I hadn't earned. At night, lying in my oversized bed in that glass mansion, I replayed their voices. Am I earning this, or just Clara's project? Was I building my own life, or just being sculpted into her vision of success? I tried to bury myself deeper in schoolwork, in the marketing club, in Zoom calls where I felt seen. But doubt crawled under my skin, whispering that I was still the abandoned girl from Chicago pretending to fit into a world that wasn't hers. And then came the message. I was scrolling through Instagram late one night, the only light in my bedroom coming from the screen glowing against my face. My chest was still tight from a day of overhearing whispers, of dodging looks that felt like knives. Notifications popped up, likes, comments, nothing unusual. But then, at the top of my inbox, a new DM. No profile picture, no followers, just a single message. "I know you from Chicago." My thumb froze. My breath hitched. The words stared back at me black against the white screen, simple but terrifying. I read it again and again. My heart pounded so hard it shook the bed beneath me. I tapped the profile, but there was nothing. Empty. No posts, no story highlights, nothing to give away who they were. Chicago. The word alone was enough to rip open wounds I'd tried to stitch shut. Was it someone from my old school? A neighbor? Or worse, someone connected to my parents and the debts that had swallowed them whole? I locked my phone, but the glow of the screen burned in my eyes long after it went dark. I lay there staring at the ceiling, every shadow in the room suddenly alive, every creak of the house amplified. My chest rose and fell too quickly, panic pressing against my ribs. Who would send that message? What did they know? I turned over, clutching the blanket, but sleep wouldn't come. The rumors at school already made me doubt my place in this world, and now this message dragged me right back into the past I was desperate to escape. The silence in my room felt suffocating. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand, but I couldn't bring myself to look. What if there was another message? What if someone was watching me, waiting for me to respond? That night, paranoia took root. My achievements, my ambitions, even the fragile trust I was building with Clara, all of it felt fragile, like one anonymous message could knock it all down. I closed my eyes, heart still pounding, and a single thought looped in my mind. Is my past catching up to me? By the time college applications rolled around, Clara and I had fallen into a rhythm that was equal parts mentor and guardian, equal parts drill sergeant and quiet protector. But the peace shattered the moment we sat down in her sunlit dining room with a stack of acceptance letters spread across the table. The California morning light spilled through the glass walls, painting long shadows across the wood, as if even the sun was eavesdropping on the fight we were about to have. "I want UCLA," I said, my voice sharp with certainty. "It's close to my friends, it's affordable, and it still has a great program." Clara didn't even look up from the acceptance packet in her hands. "USC or Stanford," she said evenly, the kind of voice she used in boardrooms when she knew she was right. "You're not thinking long-term, Mia. Networking, prestige, career opportunities, you can't measure those in weekend hangouts or dorm parties." My pulse quickened. It wasn't just about schools, it was about control. "Why can't you trust me to choose what I want?" I snapped. "Not everything has to be some calculated step toward a business empire." Her sunglasses were off, her silver bob catching the sunlight, her eyes piercing in a way that made me feel 15 again. But this time, I didn't shrink. She sighed, setting the papers down, her hands pressing against the table as if steadying herself. "You remind me of your father," she said softly. The words stung like a slap. "Excuse me?" She leaned back, her gaze far away, as though she was seeing not me, but some ghost from the past. "Your dad was brilliant," she said. "Sharp mind, natural charm. He could have built something incredible, but he gambled it all away. On cards, on horses, on shortcuts. He believed talent alone would save him. It didn't." Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before, just barely. Then she looked at me again, her eyes fierce. "I push you because I won't watch you repeat his mistakes. You have a chance to break the cycle. Don't throw it away chasing comfort." The silence between us was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. My anger softened, but another emotion rose in its place. Hurt. Because if she was bringing up my father, there was more she wasn't telling me. "Clara," I said carefully, "there's something you're not saying. What is it?" For the first time since I'd known her, she hesitated. She clasped her hands together, her rings glinting in the light, and exhaled slowly. "Your dad called me once," she admitted. "You were 16. He said he needed tuition money. For himself. He was trying to start over, or so he claimed, but he never asked about you. Not once." The words punched the air out of my lungs. My father had picked up the phone, called his sister, and begged for money, but the thought of asking about his abandoned daughter never crossed his mind. Clara's eyes softened, regret flickering across her face. I told him no. 3 weeks after Clara's funeral, grief still pressed against me like a weight I couldn't lift. The mansion felt too big without her, every corner echoing with her voice. And yet here I was, sitting in the same downtown Los Angeles law office where she'd once secured my future, staring at the city skyline through glass walls. The buzz of traffic floated up faintly, but inside the conference room, silence clung to the air like dust. The lawyer sat across from me, his desk a battlefield of documents, his silver pen tapping against the table in a steady rhythm. The smell of leather from the chairs mixed with the faint bite of ink and paper. I kept my blazer buttoned, trying to look put together, even though my hands trembled beneath the table, tracing circles along the smooth glass edge. This was supposed to be about Clara's legacy, her will, her plans for me. But a part of me dreaded the moment the door would open. And then it did. They walked in. My parents. The years had worn them down, but not enough to erase the faces burned into my memory. My mother's hair had thinned into wisps, her shoulders slightly hunched, but her eyes still darted nervously, searching for angles. My father's frame had softened, his gait slower, but the smirk on his lips was the same one I remembered from childhood, the smirk of someone who thought he could get away with anything. "Sweetheart," my mother whispered, her voice trembling, her hand outstretched. "We came as soon as we heard about Clara. We're so sorry. Sorry." The word hit me like ice water. 14 years gone, and this was what they came back with? My throat closed, words stuck behind the sharp lump in my chest. My father stepped closer, his tone practiced, smooth. "We're still your legal guardians, Mia, and with everything Clara left, the mansion, the company, it's only right that we step in. You're grieving, overwhelmed. You need us to manage this until you're ready." Manage. The word made bile rise in my throat. They weren't here for me. They were here for the millions Clara had entrusted to me, for the empire she had built brick by brick. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "There is a contingency plan in Clara's will," he said carefully, his voice deliberate. "But we'll address that in due time." His eyes flicked toward me, just for a second, as though assuring me there was more to come, something they didn't know. But my parents weren't listening. They leaned forward, weaving their stories. My mother spoke of depression, how it swallowed her whole, how she never stopped thinking of me. My father confessed to battles with addiction, gambling, the struggle to stay clean. His voice cracked at just the right moments, his hands clutching at the table as though he carried unbearable regret. They painted themselves as victims clawing for redemption, desperate for another chance. For a moment, against my will, I felt the ache of longing stir. What if just once they were telling the truth? What if they really had changed? Then my father leaned back, his expression shifting from sorrow to something darker. His voice dropped, low and steady. "We never really left, Mia. We've watched every post, your graduations, your birthdays, your breakdowns. We were always there, just not for you." The words landed like shattered glass against my chest. My breath caught. My body tensed. My vision swam. Images flickered. Me at 16 scrolling through Instagram, hoping to see a trace of them. Me at 18, staring at the empty phone, wondering if they remembered my birthday. And all along, they were there, watching, not loving, not helping, just lurking. My hands shook under the table. They spied on my life like creeps, waiting in the shadows, waiting for the moment Clara was gone so they could swoop in. Every post, every picture, every desperate attempt I made to move forward, they consumed it like voyeurs, and now they wanted to twist that into proof of their presence, as if lurking from the sidelines could replace being parents. "How could you?" I finally managed, my voice breaking, raw. "You saw everything, every tear, every failure, every birthday candle I blew out alone, and you still stayed away? You let me grow up without you, and now you want to pretend you care?" My mother's lips trembled. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but no words came. My father only leaned back farther in his chair, smug, as if my fury proved his control over me. The silence stretched heavy. Outside the glass, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the wreckage unraveling inside me. The lawyer shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, but I couldn't stay another second. My chair scraped against the floor as I pushed back, my hands trembling so violently I nearly spilled the untouched glass of water in front of me. I stood, my knees weak but locked with determination. My chest heaved, hot tears threatening to spill but held back by sheer force of will. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break here, in front of them. Without another word, I stormed out. The hallway was cooler, the air sharp against my skin, but breathing didn't come easier. My pulse pounded in my ears, footsteps echoing against the tile as I hurried toward the elevator. Behind the door I'd left, their muffled voices carried faintly, still weaving stories, still clawing for sympathy, still trying to convince someone, anyone, that they deserved a piece of what Clara left me. But I knew better now. Their endgame wasn't love. It was greed, wrapped in regret, sharpened by years of watching me like predators circling prey. And as the elevator doors slid shut, I clenched my fists and whispered to myself, if they had been watching me all at this time, then this was never over. 2 years before the day I sat across from my parents in that law office, the ground beneath me had already cracked. I can still remember the moment it began, the late afternoon light streaming through Clara's living room windows, washing the walls in gold. The air smelled faintly of jasmine tea and lemon polish, the way it always did in her house. She sat across from me on the velvet sofa, her silver bob perfectly in place, her posture as straight as ever. But her eyes gave her away. There was something steady in them, almost too steady, as if she was bracing herself to deliver a blow. "I have pancreatic cancer," she said. No hesitation, no softening of the truth. Her words landed in the room with the weight of a falling stone. The air left my lungs in a rush. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "There has to be a mistake. They misread the tests." Clara's lips curved into the smallest smile, but it wasn't comfort. It was grit. "Everyone dies, Mia. It's how you live that counts." Her voice didn't waver, but mine did. I wanted to scream, to demand another opinion, another chance, but the determination in her face made me swallow the words. For so long, she had been the one person who stood between me and chaos, and now she was staring down death like it was just another meeting on her calendar. From that moment, my life rearranged itself around her. Hospital rooms became our second home. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to my clothes, and the steady beeping of monitors filled my ears even when I lay in bed at night. I learned the mechanics of caregiving, the tug of an IV pole's wheels across linoleum, the chill of thin hospital blankets, the way Clara's hand would twitch when chemo left her body weak. At night, I tucked her into her own bed at the mansion. The house, once a fortress of glass and steel, felt softer now, more fragile. The silence was punctured by her shallow breaths, and I caught myself listening at her door just to hear the rise and fall of her chest. Her skin grew pale, her frame smaller, but her spirit never broke. One evening, when the rain tapped lightly against the wide windows, she reached for me with a hand that shook, but still carried authority. Her eyes locked onto mine, fierce even in her frailty. "You're the daughter I never let myself have," she whispered, her voice raspy but deliberate. She pressed a tissue into my palm, holding it there as though it were a medal. "And I don't regret a second of it." Tears welled before I could stop them. I wanted to tell her she wasn't just my rescuer or guardian. She was family in the truest sense. But the words tangled in my throat, heavy with everything I had never said. As her illness deepened, I stepped into the world she had built. Clara's company, once intimidating, became my responsibility. At first, the fast-talking executives and the endless stream of emails left me panicked, I sat in meetings scribbling notes with shaking hands, terrified I would ruin what she had created. But Clara coached me through it, sometimes from her hospital bed, sometimes from her desk when she was strong enough to sit upright. "Trust your instincts," she reminded me again and again. "Don't let them see fear." She would squeeze my hand with surprising strength, and slowly her confidence seeped into me. I stopped second-guessing every word, every decision. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into something bigger, something we were building together. Still, even as I poured myself into caring for her and the company, unease lingered in the corners of the house. One night, after Clara had fallen asleep, I wandered into her study. The room felt different from the rest of the mansion. Cooler, shadowed, heavy with secrets. The scent of leather-bound books and cedar polish hung in the air. Her desk gleamed under the dim light, papers neatly stacked. But on a lower shelf, half hidden, sat a small black box. When I touched it, a red light blinked back at me. A camera. My pulse quickened as I connected it to her monitor. The screen flickered, and then old footage filled the room with grainy color. Clara sat at the same desk, her hair sharper, her posture rigid. She was younger, but her expression was tense. And then I heard voices. My parents' voices. My father's first, low, sharp, a growl laced with menace. "You owe us, Clara. We know you have the money. Help us, or you'll regret it." My mother followed, her voice thinner, cracked with desperation but edged with venom. "She's just a girl. If you don't want her caught in the middle, you'll do what we ask." My stomach lurched. My nails dug into the wood of the desk as their words filled the room. This wasn't about debts alone. This was blackmail, manipulation. They had threatened Clara, used me as leverage, tried to break her resolve, and she had never told me. She carried that poison alone, shielding me while I lived under her roof, believing I was safe. Watching her on the screen, shoulders squared, defiance burning in her eyes, something inside me cracked. Clara had fought battles I never knew existed. While my parents schemed and threatened, she stood tall, protecting me without asking for thanks or recognition. The footage ended, leaving only the low hum of the monitor and my reflection in the dark glass. Wide eyes, trembling hands, a face twisted with rage and grief. Clara fought for me while they tried to break her. The thought repeated in my head like a drumbeat. Anger surged hot through my veins, not at Clara, but at them. If they had gone this far before, how far would they go now? What else had they done in the shadows that she never let me see? The study seemed to close in, the air heavy with echoes of threats long past. I shut off the monitor, but their voices lingered, seared into my mind. That night, I sat just outside her bedroom door, listening to the rhythm of her breathing through the wood. My fists were clenched, my body taut with a vow I couldn't say aloud. I would not let their poison touch her again, not while she was alive, not after, even if it meant facing truths I wasn't ready for. The downtown LA law office was quiet, but not with peace. Quiet in that suffocating way, like the air itself was holding its breath. Outside, the city buzzed in a blur of traffic and horns, but the sound was faint here, muted by glass walls and too much tension. The fluorescent lights above glared coldly onto the polished conference table, casting long reflections across stacks of paper that looked heavier than bricks. I sat at one side of the table, my hands clenched in my lap to stop them from trembling. Across from me sat my parents, my so-called parents, faces carefully arranged into masks of concern. My mother's watery eyes darted between me and the files in front of her, while my father leaned back like he owned the place, his jaw tight but his smirk never far away. The lawyer, calm as always, slid the first folder onto the table. The sound was louder than it should have been, sharp and final. "Let's begin," he said, his voice flat but edged. I tried to steady my breathing as he opened the file and pulled out the first page. "These are the financial reports," he explained, records of repeated extortion attempts against Clara. He flipped the page, then another, each one slapping against the wood like an accusation. Payments totaling $50,000. My chest tightened. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the neat lines of black ink. My father's signature, bold and careless. My mother's handwriting, pleading yet unmistakably hers. The lawyer didn't stop. "In exchange for this money," he said, "they agreed to abandon you." The words hit me like a gut punch. My pulse hammered in my ears, the room swaying slightly as though I were falling. Abandonment had always been my scar, but hearing it laid out in black and white, confirmed with receipts, it ripped that wound wide open all over again. I lifted my eyes to them. My mother looked down at her lap, her lips trembling as if silence could erase the ink on those pages. My father's fingers drummed against the table, a dull rhythm of impatience. Not guilt, not shame, just waiting. The lawyer picked up a second folder, his face darkening. "And here," he said, "are records of fabricated illnesses, requests for more money supported by falsified documents, false diagnoses, false bills. They bled Clara for every cent they could, hiding behind lies." The walls seemed to close in. Every sob story they had spun, every excuse they had made, it had all been theater, a script rehearsed for maximum effect. And still, Clara had never told me. She carried their betrayal alone while she poured herself into raising me. Then came the final envelope, cream-colored, crisp, Clara's handwriting on the front. My throat closed. The lawyer's hand lingered for a moment before sliding it to me. "Clara wanted you to have this." My fingers shook as I broke the seal, the paper soft but weighted with something far heavier than ink. I unfolded it carefully, the scent of her perfume faint on the page. Her words curved in looping ink, each one cutting straight through me. She explained that when I turned 17, she secretly adopted me. She wanted to make sure my future was secure, no matter what my parents tried. She detailed how my parents had scammed not only her, but other families too. Extortion, lies, manipulation, always with money at the center. She described the day she offered them real help, a lifeline. She would pay off their debts, set them up with honest work, give them a chance to rebuild. And they refused. They didn't want redemption. They wanted cash. Tears blurred the words as I kept reading. Then came the sentence that broke me and healed me all at once. "Mia, you were never the problem. They traded you for money. But I chose you for love, and that will always outweigh what they threw away." My hands clutched the letter like it was oxygen. Clara's love reached out from beyond the grave, wrapping around me, shielding me even now. I lifted my head. My father's eyes met mine, cold and calculating, as though he still thought he could win this. My mother's face was crumpled, but there was no fight for me there, only fear of losing what they thought they deserved. My voice shook when I first opened my mouth, but then it steadied, rising with strength I didn't know I had. "You had 14 years to make it right. 14 years. And every single time you picked cash instead." The words rang sharp in the stillness, slicing through the space between us. My father's smirk faltered, if only for a second. My mother's tears spilled silently, her hands twitching uselessly in her lap. I turned to the lawyer, my chest rising and falling in ragged determination. "File the restraining order." My parents erupted in protests, my mother's voice shaking with desperation, my father's hard with fury, but none of it touched me. The decision was final. They would not circle my life again like vultures. They had no claim to me, no hold over Clara's empire, no part in the future I was building. Inside, emotions collided, rage at their greed, sorrow for what could never be repaired, and relief, powerful and unexpected. Clara had given me everything they never could: stability, love, family. They had bartered me away, but she had chosen me, fiercely and irrevocably. As the lawyer gathered the files into neat stacks, the silence stretched thick and final. The gulf between me and my parents yawned wider than ever, unbridgeable now. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud against the polished floor. I stood tall, my spine straight, my fists unclenched at last. Walking out of that office, I knew the scars would always remain, but scars are proof of survival, and survival was no longer enough. Clara had given me more than survival. She had given me a life, a name, a legacy. They traded me for money, but Clara gave me everything, and that truth was mine to keep, no matter what they had tried to take. 6 months. It sounds short, but it feels like a lifetime stretched thin, marked by moments of rebuilding and moments where the silence still cuts deep. The mansion, once a hollow glass fortress echoing with absence, now feels alive. I painted the walls warmer shades, soft creams and pale golds, letting sunlight dance across the space instead of bouncing off it coldly. The smell of brewed coffee greets me each morning, drifting from the nook I turned into a small cafe corner just for myself. Plants spill their green leaves into corners that once felt dead. Each change is my way of telling the house and myself that this is home now. Clara's study used to feel untouchable, but it's mine now, reshaped into a Zoom office. The desk, polished smooth, still carries a faint trace of her perfume when the afternoon sun warms the wood. I filled the walls with corkboards plastered with campaign notes, sketches, and color swatches. Rolls of fabric lean against bookshelves where fashion tomes used to stand. The clicking of keyboards, the soft hum of notifications, the buzz of video calls. It's all mine to command. Even the pool house has been transformed into a gym where I sweat out my anger and grief. The rhythm of my sneakers on the treadmill feels like a heartbeat, reminding me I'm still here, still moving forward. The company is more than surviving, it's thriving. The TikTok campaigns I spearheaded exploded online. Models twirled in Clara's designs, set to viral sounds, videos looping millions of times. Sales doubled. For the first time, top designers and influencers reached out to me, not as Clara's niece, not as her orphaned ward, but as the woman leading the empire. I remember walking into our glass headquarters downtown, the faint tang of toner and lilies at the reception desk, voices rising and falling like music around me, heads turned. But instead of feeling like an imposter, I felt solid, grounded. For the first time, I didn't shrink under their gaze. I held it. But Clara's true legacy isn't measured in sales graphs or campaign views. It's in the Clara Foundation. We launched it to support kids who grew up abandoned, who know the sharp sting of waiting by doors that never open. We fund therapy, mentorship, and scholarships. The first recipient, a girl named Sophia, sent me a letter in shaky handwriting that I keep framed on my desk. "I thought being left meant being less," she wrote. "Now I know it doesn't." I cried when I read it, not because it hurt, but because it healed. Clara would have smiled her rare, proud smile. At night, when the LA skyline flickers below like a galaxy, I sit at Clara's grave under the swaying palms. Her headstone is simple, her name carved with clean strength, lilies blooming at its base. I replace them weekly, sometimes whispering updates as if she's still on the other side of the study door. I read her last letter aloud often, the paper softened from my touch, but her looping script clear as ever. "You were my daughter in every way that matters." Every time those words cross my lips, I feel her love wrap around me, silencing the lies my parents burned into me with their abandonment. Clara's quiet love drowned out their loud betrayals. She taught me that family is not blood, it's action, it's sacrifice. It's the unwavering choice to stand by someone when no one else will. Still, the past doesn't release me completely. One night, as I worked late in my office, surrounded by fabric swatches and the blue glow of my laptop, an email slid into my inbox. No subject line, no sender, just one sentence. There are things about your parents Clara never told you. I was there. Do you want to know? The screen bathed my face in cold light, and my breath caught. My cursor hovered over reply, frozen. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Another secret? Another betrayal? Or maybe the final piece of the puzzle I've been piecing together my entire life. I stared at the message until the words blurred, torn between wanting the truth and fearing it might unravel everything I've built. It reminded me that closure isn't neat. Healing doesn't erase scars. The past stretches long fingers, tugging at the edges of peace, daring me to look back. But I've learned something. I am not defined by their shadows. I am defined by the light Clara placed in my hands and by what I do with it. So I keep moving forward, with the company, with the foundation, with this mansion that no longer feels like a cold cage but a home, one that holds laughter, purpose, and echoes of Clara's love. When I see my reflection now, I see traces of her strength in my spine, her resilience in my eyes. I see scars too, but scars are proof of survival, and survival has blossomed into purpose. Family, I've realized, is not about DNA. It's not about people who watched from a distance waiting to strike. It's about those who step into the fire with you, who show up again and again, even when it costs them. Clara proved that with every breath of her life. And now I want to turn to you. Have you ever had to redefine family? Do you believe blood deserves forgiveness, or must it be earned through care and consistency? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you've faced toxic family, and subscribe for more true stories. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the family you choose can heal more than the one you're born into.